Winds here bring about change and opportunity. Historically, winds generally blew ships to the port. These ships resupplied while waiting for the monsoon to pass, for the seasons to change. And as the Greek philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus would have said, change is the only constant. And yet, change often appears daunting, unsettling, destabilizing, disrupting. Especially true for technological change. They disrupt our habit, our emotions, our jobs, our social interaction, for better or for worse. The key is to harness the benefits while managing the risks. Think of the regulatory sandbox where new ideas can be tested. Think of the FinTech Innovation Lab and its collaboration with major central banks on cross-border payments. So in this context, and in my position as head of the IMF, I would like to explore three particular areas. First, I want to frame the issue in terms of the changing nature of money and the fintech revolution. Second, I would like to evaluate the role of central banks in this new financial landscape, especially in relation to providing digital currency. And third, I would like to look at the downsides, the risks, if you will, and consider how they can be minimized. Let me begin with the big issue, the change of money. How is money changing? When commerce was local, centered around the town square, money in the form of token, shells to begin with, metal coins eventually, was sufficient, and it was efficient. The exchange of coins from one hand to another settled transactions. So long as the coins were valid, and that was determined by just glancing, inspecting, scratching, or sometimes biting into them, it did not matter which hand held them. But as commerce went maritime, on ships like those that passed through Singapore and covered increasingly greater distance, carrying those coins became expensive, risky, cumbersome, heavy. So Chinese paper money, introduced in the 9th century, helped, but not quite enough. Innovation produced bills of exchange, pieces of paper allowing merchants with a bank account in their home city to draw money from a bank at their destination. The Arabs called these sak, abbreviation for sukuk, the origin of our word check today. And these checks and the banks that went along with them spread around the world, spearheaded by the Italian bankers and the merchants of the Renaissance. Other examples are the Chinese chanzi and the Indian hundi bills. And suddenly it mattered who you dealt with. Was this Venetian or Persian merchant the rightful owner of that bill? Was the bill trustworthy? Was that chanzi bank going to accept it? Trust became essential. And the state became the guarantor of that trust by offering liquidity, backstop, and supervision. Why do I take you through a little bit of history background? Well, because the fintech revolution questions the two forms of money that we just discussed, coins and commercial bank deposit. And it questions the role of the state in providing money. We are at a historic turning point. You, young or not so young, doesn't matter, but bold entrepreneurs gathered here today, you are not just inventing new services, you are reinventing the history of money. You're drawing a completely new future, actually. And we are all in the process of adapting. A new wind is blowing, and it is that of digitalization. And in this new world, we meet anywhere, anytime, as they said. And surprise, surprise, the town square is back. Back on your smartphone. We exchange information, services, even emojis, instantly, peer-to-peer, person-to-person. We float through a world of information where data is the new gold, despite growing concerns about privacy, about cyber attacks. A world in which millennials are reinventing how our economy works, phone in hand. And this is key. Money itself is changing. We expect it to become more convenient, more user-friendly, perhaps even less serious-looking. We expect it to be integrated with social media, readily available for online and person-to-person use, including micropayments. And of course, we expect it to be cheap, safe, protected against criminals and prying eyes. So, what role will remain for cash in this digital world? There are already signs in some shop windows. Cash not accepted. And it's not just in Scandinavia, the poster child of a cashless world. In various other countries too, demand for cash is decreasing, as is shown in our IMF work. And in 10, 20, 30 years' time, who will still be exchanging those pieces of paper called checks? Bank deposit, too, is feeling the pressure from new forms of money. Think of the new specialized payment providers that offer e-money. From Alipay to WeChat in China, to Paytm in India, to M-Pesa in Kenya. These forms of money are designed with the digital economy in mind. They respond to what people demand and what the economy requires. Even cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple are vying for a spot in the cashless world, constantly reinventing themselves in the hope of offering more stable value and quicker and cheaper settlement. Let me now turn to my second issue. What is the role of the state? What is the role of a central bank in that new monetary landscape? Some suggest that the state should back off, should back down. Providers of e-money argue that they are less risky than banks because they do not lend money. Instead, they hold client funds in custodian accounts and simply settle payments within the network. For their part, cryptocurrencies seek to anchor trust in technology. And as long as they are transparent and you are techie savvy, you might trust their services. Still, I'm not entirely convinced. Proper regulation of these entities will remain a pillar of trust. Now, should we go further? Beyond regulation, should the state remain an active player in the market for money? Should it fill the void left by the retreat of cash? Let me be more specific. Should central banks issue a new digital form of money? A state-backed token, or perhaps an account held directly at the central bank and available to people and firms for retail payments, to each of you. True, your deposits in commercial banks are already digital, but a digital currency would be a liability of the state, like cash today, not of a private firm, the central bank, the state. And this is not science fiction. There are central banks around the world that are considering this option. In countries like Canada, like China, like Sweden, like Uruguay. And they are embracing change and new thinking, as indeed we are at the IMF. Today, we are releasing a new paper, but it's all about the pros and cons of central bank digital currencies, also called CBDC, if you want to sound really aware. So check on that paper, really interesting. And I believe that we should consider the possibility to issue digital currency. There is a role for the state to supply money to the digital economy, to satisfy public policy goals that you are familiar with, such as inclusion, security and consumer protection, to provide what the private sector cannot provide.
You gotta focus on yourself, on your faith, on your dreams, on your mind, on your health, yeah. You gotta work, never tell, keep your